Good morning, everyone. I hope you're well. We're just going to quickly introduce ourselves. So, my name is Thomas. I am a LPC student at the moment, due to join Simmons Simmons in February 2022. Do you want to quickly
I'm
introduce yourself?
Emily. Sorry, yeah, I'm Emily. We're very slick here. I'm Emily May. I'm a third seater at Simmons. I did employment and then real estate, and I'm now in litigation.
And I'm Max Rayner. I've just graduated from uni and I'm going to study the LPC next September in 2021.
Super. Right, I'll kick it off then. So as I said, I am currently 4 weeks into the LPC. So I've just completed the GDL with BPP Law School, having previously done a chemistry degree at Durham. I'm just sort of briefly going to cover sort of why I chose to change to law from chemistry, and sort of how I found the application process and the vacation schemes, etc., up until my point now. So as I said, I think for me, I really sort of changed from wanting to do chemistry to law. Maybe about my second year, I started to not so much enjoy being by doing lab work all day, every day, but I still enjoyed sort of that a little bit of the science. I enjoyed sort of the technology. I enjoyed sort of the idea of working on something new and using all my sort of analytical skills. So I think roughly about the second year, I decided I need to try and find sort of a new path, so to speak. So I think my biggest advice for people is, if you're not entirely sure, I mean, obviously, hopefully a lot of you on this are entirely sure what you want to do. I went down to my careers service, spoke with them for a couple of hours across multiple days, and they sort of started to show me what sort of opportunities I could have. From there, I think my main focus was trying to get as much experience, and not just work experience, just general experience of law as I could. So I started off reading books. I know it sounds very sort of simplistic, but I collected some articles, some books, and really just started to get an idea of what law is, what a solicitor is, and what sort of city firms, etc., are actually like. From there, I really do urge a lot of you to join your university societies. So the law societies, the pro bono societies, they will give you an exposure to an idea of what it really is to be a lawyer, and not to mention it's also a very good talking point in your interviews. From there, I think the key thing with me is I understand that it's very hard to find legal experience, but if you can, even if it's local, that all helps as much as it can. I mean, I think there's now online ones like Inside Sherpa. So they're free, they're online, anyone could do it anytime. So if you do have the time to do it, I would recommend doing it. They give, so certain different law firms will do it, focus on different areas of the law. Some focus on mergers, acquisitions, etc. So I think the really idea is it's cementing this. I've done my research. I know I want to be a lawyer. I know I want to be a solicitor, and here's why. Especially for me, coming from a STEM background, that was possibly the hardest thing to try and put across is, well, why did you do a chemistry degree then? Why do you now want to do law? So it was that idea of just building up a portfolio, so to speak, saying, no, I've researched this. This is what I want to do. I am sure of it. I'm not going to change my mind again, so to speak. In addition to this, I mean, everyone, you can go on to YouTube, there's YouTube videos, there's sites called Coursera and edX, which again, they have courses. Sometimes they might be a bit novel, a bit specific, but at the end of the day, it's still, again, building part of that idea of, yes, I want to be a lawyer, this is why. And it's every time, it's always going to help you. If you're doing this before the application, it's always going to help you and give you some sort of insight for the actual application. So your answers will naturally become better and better because you'll get an idea of what it means, what it is, and everything will be a bit more tailored rather than waffling. So that was sort of like, for me, what I sort of changed. I think another thing that's also quite useful is LinkedIn. My advice is talk to as many people as you can, as often as you can. Come to these events, ask questions, go to many different law firms, go to Insight Days. It's all this idea of building the idea of this is what you want to do. and having something to talk about your interview, because you will get the question, why law? Everyone gets it. Absolutely. It's an obvious question. So be prepared. And I think for me, I think the other thing is now it's sort of from there, you're sort of looking at your actual application. So the application, my advice really is so what I focused on really was the skills that I'd gained from my different experiences, from my chemistry degree, from my work experience, and build those skills out. But don't just say, oh, I got this skill from, I don't know, I worked a year in industry. Oh, wow, I've got this skill. What you need to do is tailor, why is that going to make you a good solicitor? And it's quite simple. You can go on, I mean, there's many websites which will give you an idea of what sort of skills. I mean, especially if you do your research into the firm, it will become quite clear what the skills they're looking for. So again, just tailor everything to the firm and just make sure you've done your research. Make sure, especially if you're applying to a firm, I know many of you will apply to many firms, but make sure you don't mix and match things. Every time write a new cover letter. If it's a cover letter application, don't just copy and paste, make it personal, because everyone knows the trick. So just make it as personal as you can, which really just comes down to simply researching. And my biggest tip is actually answer the question, because a lot of questions at different firms are all going to be very similar. So make sure you answer the question you're being asked. So I think, so the application for me for Simmons Simmons, it started off with the application, and there were some application questions. There's sort of your sort of the base work, why law, etc., etc. Then after that, there are a few tests. The tests are, for me, I found them quite difficult. My advice is go online. There's some free packages. There's also some ones that you can pay for. And as they say, practice makes perfect. You will get better at them. Don't worry. I think everyone probably found them a bit at the beginning. Following the tests, if you get through those, it's then the assessment day. So the assessment day, my biggest advice really is be confident. I always tell myself, if you get through to an interview, you're good enough. They're just seeing if it's the right fit for you. So just have that confidence, and you don't want to regret it. So just be confident, go for it. The Simmons one, there's a group exercise, a single person exercise, and there's also a personal interview with a partner or senior associate as such. In the interview with the partner / associate, there will be a sort of legal based one question, but there will also be a more sort of general why law, why all these sort of things, like personal, to get an idea. And I think overall, my experience, I found it very good. And as I said, just generally, they're not going to be testing you so much on the legal aspect. It's more on how you think and your business acumen in general. So I said, another tip is just general, keep on top of just business. Read the Financial Times if you have time. Read some textbooks if you have time. You can go to the library and take a few out. So once you do that application process, obviously this is to get onto your vacation scheme. I was on the 2-week summer vacation scheme. I had 2 seats, one in corporate and one in IP. I found them absolutely brilliant, really interesting. And I think, again, this kind of leads into why I chose Simmons Simmons. I felt like a valued member. I felt like I was actually adding something. People of all levels take the time out to talk to you and help you grow, because everyone's been there at some point. So they really do take the time. And I felt really valued, and I felt like I was actually adding value overall. And again, further, why I chose sort of Simmons Simmons just in general is I really found like the sector focus to be quite a big thing for me. I think it really helped me sort of channel and could see, well, if you do this bit of work, you know how it's complementing the business and how it's going forward. You can really see how it fits together, and you can see sort of almost like a way forward, if that makes sense. And I think for me, one of the others are going to probably talk about it a bit more, but we've got a compass scheme, which you start in your LPC. So I've only just done my first session, so I don't know a huge amount about it, but you do it throughout your LPC, I think, until you qualify, if I'm right. And it really sort of just helps you understand the business and helps you sort of, I guess, be a better lawyer, I think. So once I did the vacation scheme, I was fortunate enough to get an offer And I then went to BPP Law School to do the GDL. It seemed quite daunting at first. They do throw a lot of information at you and a lot of work, but it's all you can do it. It just takes time. Break it down. Be patient. It all comes together, and I think everyone can do it. It's just about being prepared and being organised, which, to be fair, is a skill you're going to need anyway as a lawyer. So why not start practicing now? And it obviously focuses on the fundamentals. It's the fundamentals of the law. I've just started the LPC. Really quite early on, but it seems like this is more the practical application of it all, and so far I'm really enjoying it. So any questions, I guess, from application to LPC, I can do my best to help, and I'll pass on now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a trainee in the Bristol office. I'm a third seater in litigation, so I've done a seat in corporate and a seat in real estate. I was a banking paralegal at Simmons for 2 years prior to that. So I like to think I know Simmons pretty well, considering I've probably been here now for about 3 years. So one of the reasons I chose Bristol is, it sounds a bit cliche, but you get London quality work, but Bristol lifestyle, which is nice. And basically by Bristol lifestyle, I mean, like, we can literally see the hills from our 6th floor office, so it's very nice. A lot more, no tubes, so you get a lot more fresh air. But obviously we get the London quality work, so we work very closely with our London colleagues. So for instance, I was on a deal in corporate called Project Cougar. It was huge. It was a massive deal, very challenging, but it was also great fun. It was a merger of a South African company, and it was buying shopping centres in the UK. It was very confidential, and it turned out to be very profitable for the firm. So it's always good to be involved with work like that. And yeah, and I was often up in London because it was London and Bristol team working very closely together, and it was working on IPO. So it's very exciting getting to watch the London Stock Exchange go up and down, which is quite an odd experience because you don't really expect to be doing that as a lawyer, but it was fun. And then my experience in real estate was also really good. We got to work on this big transaction called Project Nightshade, which was a lot more Bristol based. It was involved buying farmland in Wales to put solar panels on there. And this was really fun because it worked across lots of different departments. So it was real estate led, but we got to work closely with the projects team to understand how the solar panels worked. And then also there was a lot of merging and acquisitions going on. So there was a lot of crossover with corporate. So that was also a really exciting transaction. Being based in Bristol, you're always encouraged to go up to London, but it's not you have to go up to London if you're more of a Bristol based person. But it's kind of, you get the best of both worlds, basically. You get to go up to London for the day and pretend you're a hotshot London lawyer, and then you get to come back to Bristol and work from home a bit more than the London people. So it's definitely, I definitely vouch for Bristol. So what else to talk about? So seat change. I've obviously gone through 2 rounds of seat change. And the one thing I'd say that Simmons does really well is everyone's always very welcoming, and they understand how it's very challenging to be thrown into a new department every 6 months. It's quite difficult because just as you're finding your feet, you're then thrown back into a new department where you don't know what you're doing. But every time that's happened, the departments have always taken the time to train you and ask your questions. And I'd say one of the big things is they're really big on trying to integrate you socially. So especially obviously with the pandemic, everyone's been working from home, so it's been a bit more difficult. But for instance, in my last department in real estate, we had a seat changeover drinks, which was done virtually, but they basically sent loads of cocktails to everyone's house, and we got to do like a cocktail making class. So that was really nice because often things like that can be a bit missed if you're working from home. You do find like you're a bit worried you're going to miss the social side, but Simmons is definitely trying really hard to make sure trainees don't feel like they're left in a corner somewhere, just drowning in doc reviews. but yeah, and litigation's really good as well, because they've really taken the effort to make sure we have daily calls with your supervisor, and then we have fortnightly calls with all the trainees. So even though I'm based in Bristol, I never feel like, I'm the Bristol trainee. I always feel like I'm really integrated within the cohort, and I'm always given the work that a London trainee is. The only time that it can be difficult is if they require a bundle to be made, which requires some actual physical page turning. But if you really want to be involved in that, they would never turn you down from going up to London. And I'm sure a London trainee would really like that you'd go up and do it. So yeah, we work very closely with our London team, which is good. We have campus training throughout, as Thomas mentioned, which campus training, when you first start doing it, you kind of feel a bit like, what is this about? This is a bit of an weird thing, but it's really good to get to know your cohort. So you get to know everyone in your cohort really well, especially it's a good opportunity as well from being from Bristol to go up and get to know the London trainees. And it's just a good way of developing your personal skills, I guess. So it trains you to how to fight like imposter syndrome and how to have the confidence to like talk to partners. And I mean, that is one of the best things I'd say about Simmons, and why I decided to train here is the partner contact you get is, I think, is just exceptional. Like, I never feel like I can't approach a partner for if I have a question, and I always feel like a partner respects me and equally values my work that I do on their matters. And it's really easy to build up good partner relationships and with associates alike, because I think it's obviously very partner led on a transaction. So if the partner is welcoming and friendly, then the whole team is happy, and you don't mind doing those late nights when everyone's in the office happy together. So I think that's kind of all I've got to say. So I'll let the next person talk.
Thanks, Abby. So I think I'm next. So for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, I'm Emily. I'm a third seater. I did employment, real estate, and I'm now in litigation. So for the more keen-eared among you, you'll know that me and Abby did the last 2 seats together. So she stole all my good stories, but that's fine. I'll come up with other ones. So I'm in the London office, which, as Abby sort of, I think, mentioned, it hasn't really made much of a difference, especially during the pandemic when everyone's working from home. I worked on a really wide variety of work. I'm in employment. It was contentious, and a bit transactional as well, actually, but I did mostly contentious work. So that was lots of court cases, lots of the infamous bundling and page turning. In real estate, it was much more transactional. So I did less of the project stuff that Abby mentioned, and I did more of the landlord and tenant bits, which just basically means that I worked on a lot more smaller matters, as in more, smaller, not more smaller. So that was really interesting because it was complete opposite end of the spectrum. And then now in litigation, I'm back to contentious work, back to the sort of bigger projects, much more sort of the being involved in a team and seeing a matter through. So I've enjoyed both. I think both are suited to different people. I think people talk a lot about being a transactional or contentious lawyer. And I think there might be some truth in that, but I know lots of people struggle to figure out which one they are. So if you don't know exactly what type of law you want to go into, I really, really wouldn't stress about. In fact, I would say starting your training contract thinking I'm going to be X kind of lawyer is probably the worst way to do it. Like, be a bit more open-minded, be open to figuring out what it is that you're into. So I've also obviously done the seat change. How it works in Simmons is you put your top 7, is it 7, Abby? 7 choices, I think, and you rank them 1 to 7, and then the graduate development team do the impossible task of trying to make everyone happy with their seat. But you tend to get, I would say, top 3, maybe top 4, depending on what you've put, obviously, and where you are in your training contract. because I've done a really wide spectrum of departments, that means I've got to work on some really cool cases. So I've worked on really like top secret cases in employment where like the claimant and the defendant weren't even called by their names. They were called by like Miss A and Mr. X, which made me feel very James Bond. The page turning made me feel less James Bond, but that's fine. And then in real estate, I was on something called Project Topper, and the cool thing about that is that it was actually the lease and the licenses for our City Point office. So I got to work on the license. For example, we're having like some, I don't know if that's top, it can't be top secret, having like minor works done, and I got to draft the license. And what's cool about, well, I suppose it depends on your definition of cool, but what I thought was cool about that was that when we were in the office and people were talking about the works, and they were like, yeah, it's really weird, like they seem to start at a weird time, and I was like, they start at 5:30 every day, and they're like, how do you know that? I was like, because I drafted it. That was quite cool. And I've also been able to get involved in quite a lot of pro bono stuff. I think how much pro bono work you get involved in is completely up to you. There'll be some pro bono work that's department specific, so you can get involved with people in your department. I did some employment stuff, got some litigation stuff, but I also do the wider pro bono things as well. So I volunteer at the Battersea Legal Advice Clinic. You can do that from day one if you're brave enough. I wasn't, but you can do. And you get training and you get to help people on housing, employment, and general small claims issues. So that's really cool. You obviously get really hands-on work with matters, which maybe you wouldn't get until much later on in your career in other places. I've also been able to work quite closely with the Young Talent Programme, which is a organization, is that the right word? I don't know. It's a thing that we do in Simmons, that we work with. Simmons does a lot of outreach work with people who otherwise might be barred from the legal sector. It's something that's quite close to my heart. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I went to a state school. So it's something I feel quite passionately about, and it's something that I made quite known from day one, that it's something I wanted to be involved in. And it's something that the graduate recruitment team have definitely taken me up on, which I'm very happy that they have. But those my point being is that yes, absolutely, the work is interesting and the work is hard and there will be long hours, I'm not going to lie to you, but there are also lots of other things you can get involved in, and that's definitely something that you can do as much or as little as you want. The culture of the firm, I would say, kind of feeds into that. Abby spoke to it a bit, so I won't go into massive detail. And even Tom mentioned it. I'm sure Max will later. But they're good people. I think we're good people. Obviously, I'm not speaking for myself. I think other people who work here are good people. They're nice. I know we're not supposed to say that we're nice, but we are nice. We try to be anyway. And I think that that's important, because when you are working longer hours, when everyone's a bit stressed, being able to have a bit of a laugh and, you know, a joke around with the people you're working with is important. Like, for example, I worked on this case in employment, not the top secret one, different one, and the hours were hard, and they were over Christmas, and like I celebrate Christmas, so it was tough. Not on Christmas or Christmas Eve or Boxing, nothing like that, but it was tough. And ended up anyway settling at the court doors, as it often does. So it was kind of all of this, and there wasn't a big like crescendo that I was waiting for, never came. And so instead, the partner took us all out for dinner. And we went on like lunch, but it ended up being a dinner, because we went on like a 4 or 5 hour dinner with like the client and the barristers. And I very much could have not been invited, and that would have been fine. But they made a big deal about it. They were like, no, we need to make sure that Emily has time in her diary too. And I mean, that's a partner. And I think that's, like, you know, Abby mentioned it. It's not this sort of infamous partner that you can't speak to. I don't think it really has that kind of energy. Yeah, what else? Oh, the Amsterdam trip, I was going to tell you about that. So I will stop soon, Max, and you can talk, I promise. So I played for the hockey team, for the Simmons hockey team, which is funny to anyone who's ever seen me play sports, because I'm not very good at hockey. And what we do is we play with the Amsterdam team whenever we can. So on my second week, maybe first week actually, I had to take the Friday off, because we all flew out to Amsterdam and stayed there for the weekend, like fully put up, went to go play a hockey game with the Amsterdam team. They took us out for dinner, for drinks. And I think that's quite a cool experience to have, especially like, you know, in your first few weeks. And I think it speaks to the fact that we are quite integrated with our other offices. I don't think, and Abby, I'm sure will be quick to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that it's like a London-centric firm where all the other offices support it. It doesn't feel like that at all. I've been very lucky to be able to work on lots of projects with lots of different offices, and it feels very much equal, which I think is important because it leads to better quality work and more interesting experiences. So yeah, I'm really happy to answer any questions on anything, all the many things I've said, or my pro bono, or being a third seater, or Simmons in general, or anything else. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much. So I'm Max Rayner. I've just graduated from Cardiff Uni studying law. So I'm currently on a year out before I start the LPC next September. So yeah, that was really well planned with just before Corona hit. And yeah, so I'm going to have a year out, hopefully travel next year and do some work in the meantime. And then after that, I'm like Abby going to Bristol for August 2022 to start my training contract. So I'm really looking forward to that. I had quite an interesting route into Simmons Simmons because I actually applied back in 2018, went through the old application process, had an assessment centre in London, passed that, got a vacation scheme for Bristol for the summer of 2018 and 2019. And so 2019 I had my vacation scheme, and unfortunately I didn't get a training contract off the back of that vacation scheme. So that was, you know, obviously not a great outcome, a bit disappointed, but I took the feedback from that and they just wanted me to develop a bit more. So then after that, I sought out that summer, I sought out a month's paralegal work in a local firm, developed myself a bit more, engaged with some kind of, just really threw myself into it to show I listened to the feedback and developed myself. And then I applied again for the 2019-2020 application cycle. And then this March, just before coronavirus hit, I had my assessment centre and was given a training contract, which obviously was great news. So I've had a little bit of a different route. I don't think many people have had not got a training contract the first time around, then got it the second time. But I think it shows that Simmons are quite open to all sorts of applications, whether it's just because you might have messed up the first time, you know, as long as they're looking at you as a character and how you can develop over the course of you being a lawyer in their firm. So they're not interested in just maybe you've got a slightly smaller number than someone else on a bit of paper. It's about you and your character yourself. So if you've got any questions about the old application, the old assessment centre, I've just recently done the new one. So that's got the role play exercise in, which I don't believe Emily or Abby would have had, or Tom actually. So it's totally different. They have someone in pretending to be a client, and you've got to then go into the room after you've got 10 minutes to read a brief, and you walk into the room and you've got to then go and deal with a client, sell Simmons and Simmons, and really show off your personal skills. So not only have you got to talk to a partner, you've got to engage with a client, as well as the inbox exercise and the case study as well, which are more kind of traditional assessment centre stuff that hasn't changed much over the years. So if you've got any questions about that, please fire away. It's quite a surprise coming from the old style, coming to the new one, and then suddenly getting told you've got to go and talk to the client in the next room. That's quite an experience, I'll tell you that. So why did I choose Simmons Simmons? I think Abby's, and Bristol in particular, I think Abby's touched on a lot of it. It is quite unique that you can join a Bristol office, do international London work. A lot of firms, there are firms in Bristol that do high quality, you could say London work, but very few of them actually do international work. The ability to kind of cooperate with offices in Europe or in other jurisdictions. So that was a really big selling point. And from the vacation scheme, I did kind of the tactic of apply for a bunch, hopefully get some vacation schemes, because that's when you really learn. From a week working with people, that's how you really learn whether you like the firm and its culture. There's a lot, you can read a lot, and a lot of firms might look the same on paper. They'll all say they've got a great culture. But until you meet and talk to the people and go and spend a week working with them, can you really know if you fit in or not? And from that week, I mean, yeah, as Emily and Abby touched on, very friendly atmosphere. I was working very closely with an associate in the banking team in Bristol. That was great. You know, some people might say banking, that's not going to be that fun. You're just doing a lot of loan agreements, but I found it interesting. It was all right. It wasn't that bad. And then I chatted to partners in other departments, got to have lots of one-on-one chats, go for coffee with them. They're all very friendly. There was none of this kind of hierarchy of I'm just a lowly vacation scheme student. So that was really great. And from doing that week, I was really sold on the culture of the firm and the inclusivity of it all. So just some of my tips for the application centre and process, especially with the new one. Do your research. There's a lot of kind of topical things, the buzzwords at the moment, it'll be all how coronavirus is impacting the law. But if you can find a niche subject that you've researched that the firm is doing at the moment, maybe Wavelength or something, which is the new legal tech business that Simmons have bought, that kind of stuff really stands out because you haven't just browsed the main page, you haven't just, looked on Legal Cheek and seeing what they've written, which anyone can do in about half an hour. It shows that you've taken the time to really understand the firm and really try and gain a better knowledge of what the work is that they're doing at the moment. It doesn't take that long. It shows that you've done your due diligence, to use a legal term, that you really want to be a part of that firm and you're interested in the work that they're doing at the moment. You haven't just spent 5 minutes kind of throwing an application out, as I think Tom picked up on, just because anyone could do that. You really got to show that they want to be committed to you. They're going to give you a lot of good stuff. They're going to give you high quality training. They're going to fund your LPC, GDL. You've got to show that you're willing to give something back. So spending an hour or two researching and putting the time in is really worthwhile. I'm very happy to answer any questions you've got.
Amazing. I've just jumped on. So if anyone, I guess no one will know who I am. So I'm Lizzie and I'm from Rate My Placement. So I have the great job of asking you lots of questions that have come in. Thank you so much for all of those insights. They're all brilliant. I've been sitting here, listening to them all, watching the questions. I think we've had about 30 questions come in. So fab, really, really good. So I've tried to group them as we've gone along to try and make them as easy as possible. So we've got about just under 10 minutes. So if I dive straight in, so a lot of things around assessment centres, application top tips, things like that. So I know you've covered quite a few already, but I think one of the really big ones is around how you prepare. So students are looking at how are you preparing and what are the best questions to ask at assessment centres. So would one of you like to comment on that?
I could go if you like. Probably did it most recently. So so for my assessment centre, as I touched on, research is a big one, getting to know the firm, especially when this new role play exercise where you're having to engage with the client. You've got to go in and, you've got to learn a lot of information that, they might give you a package explaining the firm. But if you've got to go in and completely learn from scratch about the firm, that's going to give you you're going to be under a lot of time pressure. Whereas if you kind of look at it and say, oh, I know most of that already, there's a few bit of detail there that's going to really help my answers and my performance, I guess you could give it, really stand out. That's always going to help. It means that shows your attention to detail. Other kind of, a lot of it's quite hard to practice for the assessment centre itself. The application process, you can practice verbal reasoning, non-verbal. I think there's a video interview as well. That you can all kind of practice beforehand. You ask a friend if you can just ask some basic questions. But that is one, actually, just practicing basic kind of interview questions. Why Simmons and Simmons? Why London or Bristol? You're going to get asked it, so why wouldn't you just prepare kind of at least a sort of basic answer as to what you're going to give, and then also basic team working questions. I don't know if I've missed anything else.
Brilliant. So has anyone else got anything to add to that, or shall I move on to the next one?
I would say try and be creative with your answers as well. They're going to hear a lot of the same answers. It's not top secret when I say the questions will be why law, why you, why Simmons, and enter any law firm that you apply to. And the key, I think, is keeping the person reading or listening to your answer engaged. And the way you do that is by trying to get your personality through. Don't be worried about having only legal experience or that you have limited legal experience. Like, worry more about, you know, how you're going to make your skills feel transferable. Because, I mean, I worked in retail, I worked in an organic food store, you know, that's hardly commercial law, and you can make it transferable. And this probably feels quite repetitive because you've probably heard all this before, but I think have faith in your experiences. You've probably done much more interesting and exciting things than you think you have.
Yeah, that's great advice. Sometimes you just don't know what you've done to actually add into the application. Excellent. So I'm going to move on. A lot about culture. So I've loved all the comments you said about people, and you all seem really warm and lovely. And I know that's such a huge thing about when you're choosing a firm. So I just wanted to check in to see what the rest of you thought about why did you choose Simmons and Simmons? Because a lot of students are asking that specific question. And so anyone who hasn't mentioned about the culture, that'd be great just to hear your thoughts. Anyone?
Well, I guess
I can jump in again. Oh, go on, Abby. You go.
I mean, I was just going to say, like, mine was a bit biased because I worked here for 2 years previously, so I kind of knew Simmons culture very well. And like I said, one of the things I got quite quickly was the partner interaction, which I just really liked, and everyone just wants to help you. One of the things I love as well is, like, if I made a mistake, even as a trainee or as a paralegal, there's been so many times when you're like, oh no, I've made a mistake. And you're like, what do I do? And there's always that voice in your head where you're like, oh, no one's going to notice. Don't tell anyone. And then you're like, no, I have to tell someone because this is going to explode. And you're like preparing yourself for basically getting told off and being like, you know, this isn't what we expected. And then as soon as you told someone, they'll be like, okay, that's fine. Like, this is what we can do to solve it. And then they'll be like, it's not on you. You're a trainee, like, or you're a paralegal. Like, this isn't down to you. Like, I should have caught it. Like, thanks, bring it to my attention. Like, everyone's so supportive. Like, never have I ever felt like, you know, I can't approach someone with a mistake I've made. And, you know, if I ever have been in a situation where someone's been a bit short with me, it's often due to stress and time pressure. And then after the deal has closed or something, they'll come up to me and be like, oh, I'm really sorry, like, you know, I was just super stressed. And they'll be like, you were amazing, like, you know. So it's just such a nice firm to work at. I know I'm very biased, but yeah, I don't really have a bad thing to say.
No, that's really lovely to hear. And I think just linked to that quickly, we had a really good question around, so it's actually for you, Max. How did you deal with rejection?
Can I just jump in super quickly, Matt? Sorry.
Oh,
We've all been rejected as well.
I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, Emily, yeah, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say super quickly, we've all been rejected. I think Max spoke about his, like, I got way more no's than I got yeses. Like, Max was very brave to talk about that. I think people like to gloss over it. So I'd also like to put my hand up and say I've also been rejected. Don't worry, Matt.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, Lizzie, I didn't hear your question. I just cut out for a second.
Oh, no worries. It was just to ask, how did you deal with the rejection? Because I think that's something we were just talking then, Abigail mentioned around if you make a mistake and it's just that pressure and, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And it sounds like a lovely culture that you're in. And I just wanted to get from your thoughts, Max, how did you deal with that rejection and move on?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as Emily said, we all get it. I've had, you know, plenty of earlier stages, and as you get through each stage of the application process, you know that your chances of getting it get better and better and better. So I think it probably, you know, you go on a vacation scheme, the chance of you getting a training contract if you feel like you've done well and you've enjoyed it are quite high. So it's definitely a bit of a blow. And, you know, for probably a week afterwards, I was probably more like, I don't want to hear the feedback. I don't want to have anything to do with Simmons and Simmons. You know, they didn't want me. And then after that kind of initial bit of, I don't know, you throw a temper, you become more logical and think, well, I should probably take the feedback. So Hazel, who's now part of the graduate development team, you know, gave me a phone call, talked me through my week, the feedback I'd gotten, and you know, it was kind of a case of everyone else I'd been with on my vacation scheme. I think a lot of them had been paralegals, they had a little bit more work experience than me, and you know, there's only a certain number of places, so sometimes it doesn't always work out. And so they gave me a few tips to work on, a few development points, improve my confidence, and yeah, it's hard dealing with it, but it is worth it in the end. And so yeah, as I said, I went and sought out some paralegal work experience over the summer term, summer vacation from uni, and just reapplied. Kind of made sure when I went back, did the whole application process again, and had to go through it all again. But it's worth it in the end. So. Yeah, it's hard, but you've got to always kind of bounce back and improve, get your feedback after each time and improve on yourself, and make sure the next time you do it, you make it that little bit better, work that little bit harder.
Yeah. So I think I'll just sort of reiterate what Max is saying. It's all about sort of how you think of it. So I think the way I've always thought about it is when someone gives you feedback, they're not there to put you down, they're there to help you. And they're all about trying to help you. Everyone wants you to do well. That's the bottom line. Whatever firm, whoever's interviewing, they all want you to do well. So I think my biggest tip is obviously I understand the exact same as Mac. When I first got rejected from wherever and didn't get what I wanted, yeah, cool shit, that's normal. Like, but then just think, actually, no, they're here to help me, and just take it on board and just spend that little bit of time to do exactly what Max was saying, is try and sort of find that little bit and put it right.
Yeah. Wise words. I love that. Lots of inspiration for our audience today. There are so many questions. So due to time, what I'm going to suggest is hopefully a lot of you are going to be in the booth. So if students are looking for some answers from those specific questions, there's some very, very specific ones. Then what I suggest is if you go to the booth and then you can talk to reps at Simmons and Simmons. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. What an amazing start to the day. So much information. Thanks to everyone for all your questions. And I think what we'll do, we'll finish it there, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Super. Take care, everyone.